The maintenance tunnels of the New Horizon hummed with the steady rhythm of life support systems. Deep in the lower decks, where most crew members rarely ventured, Taemin worked alone with his tools and quiet thoughts. His hands moved with practiced ease as he checked the power conduits that fed energy to the massive ship's biodeck. At 28, Taemin had spent 3 years aboard the colony vessel without making many friends. He preferred it that way. While other humans gathered in the recreation areas to complain about the food or argue about sports from Earth, he found peace in the mechanical spaces where only the ship's heartbeat kept him company. The New Horizon carried 12,000 souls toward their new home among the stars. Humans made up barely half that number. The rest were aliens from a dozen different worlds, all seeking fresh starts or fleeing old troubles. It was supposed to be a symbol of cooperation between species, but Taemin saw how the different groups kept to themselves, eyeing each other with suspicion and fear. His work took him everywhere on the ship. From the bridge where Captain Dong-Soo made decisions that affected all their lives, to the deepest storage bays where they kept supplies for the colony they would build. But his favorite place was the biodeck, where the ship's collection of alien creatures lived in specially designed habitats. Most crew members avoided the biodeck unless their duties required it. The creatures made them nervous. Some were research specimens, others were brought as companions by alien passengers, and a few served practical purposes like waste processing or air purification. Bora from the engineering department once told Taemin that the animals gave her nightmares, but Taemin felt different around them. Not afraid, not even cautious, just curious. The first time he noticed his unusual connection with the creatures happened by accident. He had been repairing a ventilation unit near the habitat containing 3 Kelnar beetles from Proxima b. The beetles were normally aggressive, their razor-sharp mandibles capable of cutting through metal. They had injured 2 handlers in the past month, but when Taemin entered their enclosure to fix the air recycler, the beetles barely looked at him. They continued their activities as if he were just another piece of furniture. Dr. Hee-jin from the medical department happened to be nearby and watched in amazement. "How are you doing that?" she asked when he emerged from the habitat. Taemin shrugged. "Doing what? Those beetles haven't been calm around anyone since we left Earth orbit. What's your secret?" He had no answer for her. The creatures just seemed to accept his presence. Word spread quickly among the crew, and soon others began calling him to help when animals became difficult to handle. Woo Jin from security started joking that Taemin was some kind of Beastmaster. The nickname stuck, though Taemin never encouraged it. He helped when asked, but tried not to draw attention to himself. Most of the time, the animals simply ignored him, which was fine. He had his work, his small quarters, and his books about mechanical systems. That was enough. Everything changed when the ship took on cargo at Kepler Station. Among the new specimens was a creature unlike anything Taemin had ever seen. The manifest listed it as a Valdrak from the Andorian system, but no one seemed to know much about its species. It stood nearly as tall as a human at the shoulder, with a body somewhere between a wolf and a large cat. Its fur was deep gray with silver markings, and crystalline spines ran along its back from head to tail. But its eyes caught Taemin's attention, most of all. They were amber-colored and held an intelligence that seemed almost human. The creature had scars, old ones that spoke of battles fought and survived, fresh ones that suggested recent trauma. When the cargo handlers brought its container to the biodeck, the Valdrak pressed itself into the farthest corner and refused to come out. Dr. So Young, the chief xenobiologist, tried everything to coax the animal into cooperation. Food, water, even recordings of sounds from its homeworld. Nothing worked. The creature remained huddled in its transport container, amber eyes watching everyone with deep suspicion. "We might have to sedate it," So Young told Captain Dong-Soo during their weekly briefing. "It's not eating, and stress could kill it before we reach our destination." That evening, Taemin made his regular rounds through the biodeck. He paused at the Valdrak's habitat and studied the creature through the transparent barrier. It looked back at him, and for a moment, neither moved. Something passed between them. Not words or thoughts exactly, but a recognition. The Valdrak's rigid posture relaxed slightly, and its ears, which had been flat against its head, lifted just a bit. Taemin found himself speaking softly to the creature. "You're scared, aren't you? This place is strange, and these people are strangers. I understand that feeling." The Valdrak tilted its head as if listening. "I've been alone most of my life, too. Sometimes it's easier that way. No one expects anything from you, and no one can disappoint you." He stayed there for an hour, talking quietly about small things. His work, the ship, the stars they passed. The Valdrak never moved from its corner, but its eyes never left Taemin's face either. The next morning, So Young found the creature had finally eaten its food and drunk some water. She mentioned it to Taemin when their paths crossed in the Yi corridor. "Did you do something?" she asked. "The Valdrak seems calmer today." "I just talked to it," Taemin said. "Talked to it? About what?" "Nothing important, just talked." So Young studied his face with scientific curiosity. "The bio readings show its stress levels dropped significantly sometime last night, between 2200 and 2300 hours. That's when you do your maintenance rounds, isn't it?" Taemin nodded but offered no explanation. He couldn't explain what he didn't understand himself. Over the following weeks, he began spending his free time near the Valdrak's habitat. At first, he sat outside the barrier and talked about his day. Gradually, the creature began responding with small movements, a tilt of the head or a shift in position that suggested it was listening. Other crew members noticed the change. The Valdrak no longer cowered when people approached its habitat. It accepted food from the handlers and even allowed medical examinations, though it remained wary of everyone except Taemin. "It's remarkable," Heejin told him one day. "That animal's been traumatized, probably lost its entire pack or family, but somehow you're reaching it." Taemin had begun to suspect the connection went deeper than anyone realized. Sometimes when he was near the Valdrak, he caught glimpses of things that didn't make sense. Flashes of red skies and crystalline forests. Images of creatures like the Valdrak running in great packs across alien landscapes. The sensation of loss so profound it took his breath away. He named the creature Nuri, after a Korean word meaning world or universe. It seemed fitting for a being that carried such vast sadness in its amber eyes. 3 months after the Valdrak's arrival, Taemin made a discovery that changed everything. He had been granted permission to enter the habitat for direct maintenance on the environmental controls. As he worked, Nuri approached him for the first time. The creature moved slowly, cautiously, until it stood just within arm's reach. Then it did something unexpected. It pressed its forehead against Taemin's shoulder and closed its eyes. In that moment of contact, Taemin's mind exploded with sensation. He saw Nuri's memories as clearly as his own. A beautiful world with 3 moons and forests of singing, crystal. Creatures like Nuri living in harmony with their environment, their crystalline spines resonating with natural frequencies that could calm storms or encourage plant growth. Then came the darkness. Ships descending from space, bringing death and destruction. Nuri's pack fighting desperately against an enemy that consumed everything in its path. The last desperate escape as their world died behind them. Nuri was alone because it was the last, the final survivor of an entire species. When the vision ended, Taemin found himself sitting on the habitat floor with Nuri's great head in his lap. The creature's amber eyes looked up at him with an expression of profound gratitude and trust. From that day forward, their bond deepened. Taemin discovered he could sense Nuri's emotions, and sometimes even its thoughts. The creature seemed to understand his feelings in return. They became companions in the truest sense, 2 lonely souls finding comfort in each other. The crew continued to call him Beastmaster, not knowing that he had formed a genuine connection with only one creature aboard the ship, a creature that carried secrets that would soon prove vital to all their survival. As the New Horizon continued its journey through space, neither Taemin nor Nuri could know that ancient enemies were stirring in the darkness between stars, and their bond would soon be tested in ways neither could imagine. 6 months had passed since Nuri arrived on the New Horizon. The bond between Taemin and the Valdrak had grown stronger with each passing day. What started as simple companionship had become something deeper, a connection that neither fully understood but both treasured. Taemin spent every evening in the biodeck with Nuri. They would sit together in comfortable silence, or Taemin would talk about his work while the great creature listened with patient amber eyes. Sometimes, when their minds touched through their mysterious link, Taemin caught glimpses of Nuri's lost world. Beautiful memories of crystal forests and silver rivers that made the creature's current sadness even more heartbreaking. The other crew members had grown used to seeing them together. Bora from engineering often joked that Taemin spent more time with his alien friend than with humans. She was probably right, but Taemin didn't mind. Nuri never judged him or expected him to be someone he wasn't. Captain Dong-Su noticed the change in both of them. During his weekly inspections, he observed how calm the biodeck had become since Taemin started spending time there. Even the most aggressive specimen seemed more relaxed when the quiet maintenance worker was around. "You have a gift," the captain told Taemin one day. "The xenobiologists are amazed by how the animals respond to you." Taemin shrugged, uncomfortable with the attention. "I just treat them with respect." "It's more than that," Dong-Su said. "Dr. So-Young says the stress hormones in all our specimens have dropped significantly since you started your visits. Whatever you're doing, keep it up." But their peaceful routine was about to be shattered. The distress signal came on a Tuesday morning while Taemin was replacing power cells in the lower decks. Emergency klaxons blared throughout the ship and Captain Dong-Su's voice echoed from the speakers. "All senior staff report to the bridge immediately. We have received a priority distress call." Taemin felt a chill run down his spine. Through his connection with Nuri, he sensed the creature's sudden agitation. The Valdrak was pacing in its habitat, amber eyes wide with what looked like fear. Within hours, the news spread throughout the ship. A human research station on Kepler 442b had sent out an emergency transmission before going completely silent. The station housed over 200 scientists studying the planet's unique ecosystem. Now there was no response to any communication attempts. Dr. Chan Wu, the ship's communications officer, played the final transmission for the senior staff. The voice of Dr. Park Ye-jin, the station's director, crackled through the speakers. "This is Research Station Alpha to any ships in range. We are experiencing massive seismic disturbances across the northern continent. The underground sensor network is detecting movement in the deep cavern systems. Large movement. We need immediate evacuation support. The readings don't match any known geological phenomena." The transmission cut to static, and then nothing. Captain Dong-Su made the decision to alter course toward Kepler 442b. It would delay their journey to the colony site by several months, but they couldn't ignore a distress call from fellow humans. The New Horizon changed direction. Taemin noticed disturbing changes in Nuri's behavior. The creature barely ate and spent hours staring at the walls of its habitat with an intensity that worried him. When Taemin tried to connect with Nuri's mind, he encountered flashes of images that made no sense. Dark tunnels stretching deep into a planet's core, creatures moving in perfect synchronization, their bodies gleaming like black metal. Most disturbing of all were the sounds, a chittering, clicking noise that seemed to come from thousands of throats at once, creating a harmony that hurt to hear. "What are you seeing?" Taemin whispered to Nuri during one of their evening sessions. "What's got you so scared?" The Valdrak pressed its great head against Taemin's chest, and suddenly, his mind was flooded with memories that weren't his own. Ancient memories passed down through generations of Nuri's people. He saw Nuri's homeworld as it had been long ago, when the crystal forests sang with natural harmonies and great packs of Valdrak roamed freely. But then came the darkness from below, creatures that devoured everything they touched, turning living worlds into dead husks. The memories showed a desperate battle, Valdrak fighting alongside other species against an enemy that seemed unstoppable. The creatures from below moved like a single organism, thinking with one mind and consuming with countless mouths. Taemin gasped and pulled back from the connection. His hands were shaking and sweat beaded on his forehead. The visions felt more real than his own memories. "Devourers," he whispered, the word coming from somewhere deep in Nuri's genetic memory. That's what they're called. Nuri's amber eyes fixed on his face, and Taemin felt the creature's agreement and its terror. As the New Horizon approached Kepler 442b, the ship's sensors began picking up disturbing readings. The planet's surface showed signs of recent geological activity. Massive crater-like formations had appeared across the northern continent where the research station was located. Dr. So-young studied the sensor data with growing alarm. "These formations are too regular to be natural," she reported to Captain Dong-su. "They look almost like tunnel entrances, but they're enormous. Some are over 1 kilometer wide." The alien members of the crew began showing signs of distress. The Thraxians, a peaceful species known for their calm demeanor, huddled together in their quarters and refused to venture into the common areas. The insectoid Kelhari, normally aggressive and territorial, became passive and withdrawn. Only the Ai, humans, seemed unaffected by whatever was causing the other species such anxiety. Wu Jin from security noticed the change first. "It's like they can sense something we can't," he told his team during a briefing. "Even the animals in the biodeck are acting strange, all except that Valdrak that Taemin spends time with." That wasn't entirely true. Nuri was certainly agitated, but it wasn't hiding in fear like the other creatures. Instead, it seemed to be preparing for something. The crystalline spines along its back had begun to glow faintly, pulsing with a rhythm that reminded Taemin of a heartbeat. Dr. Hyojin ran medical scans on several alien crew members and found elevated stress hormones across all species except humans. "It's as if they're responding to some kind of pheromone or psychic signal," she reported. "Something that doesn't affect human biology." 3 days out from Kepler 442b, Taemin experienced his most vivid connection with Nuri yet. He was performing routine maintenance in the biodeck when the Valdrak suddenly approached and placed its forehead against his hands. The vision that followed was unlike anything he had experienced before. He saw the planet they were approaching, but not as it appeared on their sensors. He saw it as Nuri's genetic memories knew it would become. The surface was covered with a writhing mass of black creatures, each the size of a small vehicle. They moved in perfect coordination, building structures that looked like a cross between buildings and living organisms. Underground, vast tunnel networks stretched for thousands of kilometers, connecting massive chambers where larger creatures waited in the darkness. At the center of it all was something that made Taemin's mind recoil in horror. A creature so large it seemed to fill an entire cavern, its body a grotesque fusion of organic and mechanical parts. Its presence radiated malevolence that could be felt across space. The Queen, the source of the hive mind that controlled all the others. When the vision ended, Taemin found himself on his knees beside Nuri's habitat. The creature was making a low humming sound, its crystalline spines glowing brighter than he had ever seen them. "You know what's down there," Taemin said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Your people fought them before." Nuri's response came, not in words but in emotional understanding. Yes, the Valdrak had fought the Devourers. It was what they were created for, in the ancient days when civilization still had time to prepare for such threats. But Nuri was alone now, the last of its kind facing an enemy that had destroyed countless worlds. As the New Horizon entered orbit around Kepler 442b, Captain Dong-su prepared rescue teams to investigate the silent research station. He had no idea that they were descending toward an enemy that had been waiting in the planet's depths for millennia, an enemy that had finally awakened and begun its terrible work. In the biodeck, Taemin held Nuri close and felt the creature's determination mixed with its fear. Whatever was down on that planet, they would face it together. The quiet maintenance worker and the last Valdrak, bound by a connection that neither fully understood but both trusted completely. The approaching storm was about to test that bond in ways that would determine not just their survival, but the fate of everyone aboard the New Horizon. The rescue shuttle dropped through Kepler 442b's atmosphere like a stone falling into dark water. Security Chief Kiho gripped his weapon tighter as he watched the planet's surface grow larger through the viewport. Beside him, team members Namsu and Yejin checked their equipment one final time. "Remember, we go in fast and quiet," Kaiho said into his comm unit. Find any survivors, gather what data we can, and get out. Something killed the communications from that research station, and I don't want to find out what it was the hard way. The shuttle pilot, a nervous young man named Jun-Ho, guided them toward the coordinates of Research Station Alpha. What they saw through the cockpit windows made everyone fall silent. The research station looked like it had been torn apart from the inside. Buildings that should have housed laboratories and living quarters were split open like broken eggs. Strange organic growths covered the metal structures, pulsing with a sickly green light. What in the name of Earth happened here? Namsu whispered. Ki-ho activated his scanner and immediately wished he hadn't. The readings showed massive tunnel systems directly beneath the station, stretching down for kilometers. Something was moving down there. Lots of somethings. They landed the shuttle a safe distance from the ruined station and approached on foot. The ground felt wrong under their boots, too soft and spongy. When Ye-jin knelt to take a soil sample, her gloved hand came up covered with a black substance that moved like it was alive. "We need to be very careful," she said, sealing the sample in a containment unit. "This stuff is organic, but it's not from any Earth-based life form I've ever seen." The team made their way through the destroyed station, searching for survivors or at least some clue about what had happened. They found neither. Instead, they discovered something far worse. The main laboratory had been converted into something that hurt to look at. The walls were covered with the same organic material they had seen outside, but here it formed patterns that seemed to shift and move when nobody was looking directly at them. In the center of the room was a hole in the floor that disappeared into absolute darkness. "This wasn't here in the original station blueprints," Ki-ho said, consulting his datapad. "Something made this hole. Something big." A sound echoed up from the depths. A clicking, chittering noise that seemed to come from hundreds of sources at once. The team instinctively raised their weapons, though they had no idea what they might be facing. "We should go back to the shuttle," Ye-jin said. "Report what we found and let the science teams figure out what to do next." But as they turned to leave, the hole in the floor began to glow with the same sickly green light they had seen outside. The chittering sound grew louder, and shapes began to emerge from the darkness below. The creatures that climbed out of the hole were like nothing in any xenobiology textbook. They were roughly the size of large dogs, but their bodies looked like they were made of black metal and living tissue fused together. They had too many legs, each ending in razor-sharp claws, and their heads were dominated by mandibles that clicked constantly. "Run!" Ki-ho shouted, but it was already too late. The creatures moved with perfect coordination, spreading out to block all the exits from the laboratory. More were emerging from the hole every second, and their chittering calls were being answered from other parts of the ruined station. Namsu opened fire with his plasma rifle, and the beam struck one of the creature's center mass. Instead of falling, the thing absorbed the energy and seemed to grow slightly larger. Its black carapace gleamed brighter, and it let out a sound that might have been laughter. "The weapons aren't working," Ye-jin yelled over the increasing noise. "They're adapting to our attacks." The team fought their way toward the nearest exit, but more creatures poured in from the corridors. Within minutes, they found themselves trapped in a small storage room with only one way in or out. Ki-ho managed to seal the door, but they could hear the creatures on the other side clicking and scratching at the metal barrier. "Our communications are dead," Namsu reported, checking his equipment. "Something is jamming all our signals. The ship doesn't even know we're in trouble." Meanwhile, aboard the New Horizon, Taiman was experiencing the most intense connection with Nuri he had ever felt. The Valdrak was in obvious distress, pacing its habitat and making low growling sounds that seemed to vibrate through the ship's hull. When Taiman approached the creature, Nuri immediately pressed its head against the barrier between them. The mental link that opened was so strong it knocked Taiman to his knees. Through Nuri's genetic memories, he saw the truth about the creatures attacking the rescue team. They were called Devourers, and they were far more dangerous than anyone aboard the New Horizon could imagine. The Devourers were not just predators. They were a hive mind, a single consciousness spread across millions of individual bodies. Every creature they consumed added to their knowledge and abilities. Every world they destroyed made them stronger. Nuri's people, the Valdrak, had been created by an ancient civilization specifically to fight the Devourers. The crystalline spines on their backs could generate a harmonic frequency that disrupted the hive mind's control over its drones. But the process was dangerous, requiring the Valdrak to burn out their own nervous systems to generate enough power. Taemin saw flashes of the Great War that had consumed Nuri's homeworld. Thousands of Valdrak standing together, their spines glowing like stars as they sang their death song. The Devourers had been driven back, sealed away in the deep places between worlds. But the cost had been terrible. Almost every Valdrak had died in that final battle. "You're the last one," Taemin whispered, understanding flooding through him. "You carry all their memories, all their knowledge about how to fight these things." Nuri's amber eyes met his through the barrier, and Taemin felt the creature's desperate need to help the humans trapped on the planet below. But there was fear there too, fear of dying alone, the last of its kind, with nobody to remember what the Valdrak had once been. Captain Dongsu's voice echoed through the ship's communication system, calling all available personnel to emergency stations. The rescue team had missed their scheduled check-in, and long-range scanners were detecting massive movement beneath the planet's surface. In the biodeck, several of the alien creatures had begun to panic. The Thraxians were making distress calls in their own language, while the Kelhari had retreated to the deepest corners of their habitats. Only Nuri remained calm, though its crystalline spines had begun to pulse with increasing brightness. Dr. So-Young arrived at the biodeck to check on the animals and found Taemin sitting beside Nuri's habitat with tears streaming down his face. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Are you injured?" "The team on the planet," Taemin said without looking away from Nuri. "They're in terrible danger. The creatures down there, they're not just animals. They're something much worse." "How could you possibly know that?" So-Young demanded. "We haven't heard from the rescue team in hours." Taemin finally turned to face her, and she was shocked by the intensity in his eyes. "Nuri told me, through our connection, its people fought these creatures before, a long time ago. They're called Devourers, and they consume entire worlds." So-Young stared at him as if he had lost his mind. "That's impossible. Animals don't have species memories. They can't share historical information." "Nuri isn't just an animal," Taemin said. "Its people were created to be living weapons against the Devourers. Every Valdrak carries the genetic knowledge of how to fight them, but using that knowledge means death." Before So-Young could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. Captain Dongsu's voice filled the air with urgency. "All hands to emergency stations. We have lost contact with the rescue team, and sensors indicate massive hostile movement on the planet's surface. Prepare for immediate departure from orbit." But Taemin knew they couldn't just leave. Kiho, Namsu, Yejin, and the shuttle pilot were still down there, trapped and running out of time. The Devourers would consume them, adding their knowledge and abilities to the hive mind's growing power. He looked at Nuri, seeing his own determination reflected in the creature's amber eyes. The Valdrak's spines were glowing brighter now, ready to fulfill the purpose its entire species had been created for. "We have to go down there," Taemin said. "We have to help them." So-Young shook her head. "That's suicide. Captain Dongsu will never authorize it." "Then we don't ask for authorization," Taemin replied, his mind already working on a plan. "We take a shuttle and go ourselves." As if understanding his words, Nuri let out a low growl that resonated through the biodeck. The sound was picked up by the ship's other alien creatures, who began responding with calls of their own. For the first time since leaving Earth, all the different species seemed to be speaking with one voice, the voice of those who refused to abandon their friends to the darkness. The shuttle bay was nearly empty when Taemin and Nuri made their way through the shadows. Most of the crew was at emergency stations, preparing for the New Horizon to leave orbit. They had no idea that the quiet maintenance worker and his alien companion were about to steal one of their shuttles. Taemin had managed to override the biodeck security using his maintenance access codes. Getting Nuri to the shuttle bay had been more difficult, but the creature seemed to understand the urgency. It followed him through the service corridors without making a sound, its amber eyes focused and alert. The shuttle he chose was a small cargo transport, designed for moving supplies between ships and stations. It wasn't built for combat, but it was fast and had enough room for both him and Nuri. More importantly, it had a medical bay where they might be able to help any survivors they found. As Taimin ran through the pre-flight checklist, his hands shook with nervous energy. He had basic pilot training from his time in the merchant fleet, but he had never flown in a combat situation. Through their mental link, he felt Nuri's calm confidence, and it helped steady his nerves. "We're really doing this," he whispered to the Valdrak. "Going down there to face those things." Nuri's response came as a warm feeling of determination mixed with acceptance. The creature knew what lay ahead, had always known this moment would come. Its entire species had been created for this purpose, and now it was time to fulfill that destiny. The shuttle launched from the New Horizon just as Captain Dong-Su was giving orders to prepare for departure. By the time anyone noticed what had happened, Taimin and Nuri were already entering the planet's atmosphere. Dr. Suna in the medical bay was the first to discover their absence. She had come to check on the alien creatures after several crew members reported strange behavior from their pets and companions. Finding Nuri's habitat empty, she immediately contacted Captain Dong-Su. "Sir, we have a problem. The Valdrak is missing, and I can't locate Taimin anywhere on the ship." Dong-Su's voice crackled over the comm system as he realized what had happened. "Track all shuttle departures in the last hour. If that fool has taken a ship down to the planet, he's signing his own death warrant." But it was too late to stop them. Taimin guided the shuttle toward the coordinates where the rescue team had last been detected. The planet's surface looked even worse from close up. What had once been green forests and blue rivers was now covered with a spreading network of black organic matter. It pulsed and writhed like a living thing, covering everything in its path. The shuttle's sensors detected the rescue team's life signs, but they were fading fast. Kiho, Namsu, Yejin, and pilot Junho were trapped in an underground chamber about 2 kilometers from where they had landed. Hundreds of Devourer drones surrounded their position, and more were arriving every minute. Taimin set the shuttle down as close as he dared to the entrance of the tunnel system. The moment they stepped outside, the wrongness of this place hit him like a physical blow. The air itself felt hungry, and every surface they could see was covered with the same black organic growth they had spotted from orbit. Nuri's crystalline spines began to glow more brightly as they approached the tunnel entrance. Through their mental connection, Taimin felt the creature's recognition of this place. Not this specific location, but this type of environment. The Devourers always followed the same pattern when they consumed a world. The tunnels stretched down into the planet's core, but they weren't natural formations. The Devourers had carved them, creating a vast network that would eventually hollow out the entire world. At the center of it all would be the Queen, the massive creature that controlled the hive mind and directed the consumption process. They found the rescue team's location using the shuttle's tracking system. Kiho and his people had barricaded themselves in what looked like an old maintenance chamber, but their defenses wouldn't hold much longer. The door was buckling under constant assault from dozens of Devourer drones. "We're here to help," Taimin called out as he and Nuri approached the trapped team. "We're going to get you out of here." Kiho's voice came from behind the failing barricade, filled with desperate hope. "Taimin, what are you doing down here? And why did you bring that animal?" "Nuri isn't just an animal," Taimin replied, checking his equipment. "Its people were created to fight these creatures, but we need to move fast. The drones are adapting to everything you throw at them." As if to prove his point, one of the Devourer creatures managed to tear through the barricade. Its black carapace gleamed with absorbed energy from the team's weapons, and its mandibles clicked with what sounded like satisfaction. Nuri stepped forward and let out a low growl that seemed to vibrate through the tunnel walls. The attacking drone stopped in its tracks, its clicking sounds faltering for the first time. The other creatures nearby also hesitated, as if they were suddenly unsure of themselves. "It's disrupting their hive-mind connection," Taimin explained as he helped Kiho and the others out of their hiding place. "But it won't last long. We need to get to the surface before they adapt." The journey back through the tunnels became a running battle. More Devourer drones appeared from side passages, but Nuri's presence kept them confused and disorganized. The creature's spines glowed brighter with each encounter, and Taemin could feel the strain it was putting on Nuri's system. They were almost at the surface when disaster struck. A sound echoed through the tunnels that made everyone freeze in terror. It was like the roar of 1,000 engines combined with the scream of tearing metal. Deep below them, something enormous was moving. The Queen, Taemin whispered, understanding flooding through him from Nuri's genetic memories. She's waking up. The tunnel walls began to pulse with renewed energy, and the organic growth covering every surface started to spread faster. The Queen was feeding power to her drones, overriding Nuri's disruption signal through sheer force. "Run!" Kiho shouted, and they all sprinted toward the tunnel entrance. Behind them, the clicking sounds of hundreds of devourer drones echoed off the walls. The creatures were no longer confused. They were hunting. They reached the surface just as the ground beneath their feet began to shake. Cracks appeared in the tunnel entrance, and through the gaps, they could see movement in the depths. The Queen was rising, bringing her full attention to bear on the surface world. Taemin's shuttle sat where he had left it, but the organic growth had already begun to spread across its hull. They would be able to take off, but barely. As they climbed aboard, Nuri stopped at the shuttle's entrance and looked back toward the tunnels. Through their mental connection, Taemin felt the creature's growing understanding of what needed to be done. The Queen was too powerful to be stopped by simple disruption. She had been growing stronger for millennia, feeding on the knowledge and abilities of countless consumed worlds. To defeat her, Nuri would need to do what its ancestors had done long ago. It would need to sing the death song. "No," Taemin said aloud, understanding what Nuri was thinking. "There has to be another way. I won't let you sacrifice yourself." But Nuri's amber eyes held a calm acceptance that broke Taemin's heart. The creature pressed its forehead against his hands one last time, sharing a final vision. Taemin saw the Queen in all her terrible glory. A creature the size of a building, her body a fusion of organic and mechanical parts that pulsed with malevolent intelligence. Around her, millions of drones waited for orders, ready to spread across the galaxy and consume world after world. But he also saw hope. Nuri's death song wouldn't just disrupt the local drones. It would create a harmonic resonance that would destroy the Queen herself, breaking the hive mind forever. The price would be the last Valdrak's life, but it would save countless other worlds from the same fate that had befallen Nuri's home. The shuttle lifted off just as the Queen's massive form began to emerge from the largest tunnel entrance. Her presence filled the air with psychic pressure that made the human crew members scream in pain. Only Taemin remained conscious, protected by his connection to Nuri. As they climbed toward orbit, Nuri made its choice. The creature's crystalline spines began to glow with the light of a small star, and a sound unlike anything Taemin had ever heard filled the shuttle. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time, the song of a species that had been created to stand against the darkness, singing their final defiance against an enemy that had destroyed their world. Below them, the Queen's roar of rage and pain echoed across the planet as Nuri's death song began to tear apart the hive mind that had controlled the devourers for millions of years. Nuri's death song filled the shuttle like liquid light made into sound. The crystalline spines along the Valdrak's back blazed with an intensity that should have been blinding, but instead created a warm glow that seemed to reach into every corner of the small vessel. Taemin knelt beside his companion, one hand resting on the creature's great head as Nuri poured everything it had into the ancient harmony. Through their mental connection, he felt the song's true power. It wasn't just sound or light. It was the concentrated essence of an entire species, all their knowledge and sacrifice focused into one final act of defiance. The other members of the rescue team watched in amazement and growing understanding. Kiho, Namsu, Yejin, and Junho had seen the devourer creatures up close. They knew what kind of enemy they were facing. Now they witnessed something equally impossible, a creature willingly giving its life to save theirs. "What's happening to it?" Yejin whispered, her medical training making her reach for her scanner before stopping herself. This was beyond anything science could measure. "It's saving us all," Taemin replied, his voice thick with emotion. Nuri's people were created for this moment, to stand against the darkness when no one else could. Below them, on the planet's surface, the Queen's massive form writhed in agony. The death song was tearing through the hive mind like fire through dry grass. Every drone connected to her consciousness felt the disruption, their perfect coordination dissolving into chaos. The Queen tried to fight back, pouring more power into her psychic network to overwhelm Nuri's song. But the Valdrak had been designed specifically to counter this enemy. Every note of the death song was calibrated to match the exact frequency that would destroy the hive mind's neural pathways. Across the planet, devourer drones began to collapse. Without the Queen's guiding intelligence, they were just biological, machines with no purpose or direction. The black organic growth that had been spreading across the surface stopped its advance and began to wither. In the shuttle, Nuri's song reached its crescendo. The creature's amber eyes found Tai Min's face one last time, and through their connection came a flood of gratitude and love, not just from Nuri, but from every Valdrak that had ever lived. The entire species was saying goodbye through their last representative. Tai Min felt tears streaming down his face as he experienced memories that spanned millennia. The first Valdrak, created in laboratories by desperate scientists as their world burned around them. Generations of the creatures living and dying in service to life itself, always ready to make the ultimate sacrifice when darkness threatened the galaxy. And now the last of them was fulfilling that ancient purpose, alone except for one human who had learned to hear their silent voice. "Thank you," Tai Min whispered. "For everything. For being my friend. For saving us all." Nuri's response came not in words, but in a feeling of complete peace. The creature had never been truly alone, because it carried within itself the love and memories of its entire species. And now it was passing that legacy on to Tai Min, the first being from another world, to truly understand what the Valdrak had sacrificed. The death song reached its final note, a sound so pure and powerful that it seemed to resonate through the fabric of space itself. On the planet below, the Queen let out one last shriek of rage and pain before her massive form went still. The hive mind that had terrorized the galaxy for millions of years was finally broken. Nuri collapsed gently to the shuttle floor, the light fading from its crystalline spines. Its amber eyes looked up at Tai Min with an expression of profound contentment before closing forever. The last Valdrak was gone, but its sacrifice had saved countless worlds from the devourer threat. The shuttle docked with the New Horizon 20 minutes later. Captain Dongsu was waiting in the bay with Dr. So Young and several security officers. They had expected to arrest Tai Min for stealing a shuttle and endangering the rescue mission. Instead, they found themselves witnesses to something unprecedented. Tai Min carried Nuri's body from the shuttle with careful reverence. The creature looked peaceful in death, its scarred form finally at rest. The crystalline spines along its back were dark now, but they still held traces of the inner light that had saved them all. "What happened down there?" Captain Dongsu asked, his anger forgotten in the face of obvious tragedy. Kehoe stepped forward to answer. "That creature saved our lives, sir. Saved all our lives. The things we saw on that planet, they weren't just animals. They were part of something bigger. Something that wanted to consume everything living." "The devourers," Tai Min said quietly, never taking his eyes off Nuri's still form. "An ancient enemy that destroyed worlds. Nuri's people were created to fight them, and now the last of them has given its life to stop them forever." Dr. So Young ran her scanners over the planet's surface and confirmed what they all hoped to hear. The hostile readings were gone. Whatever had been moving in those tunnels was now silent and still. Over the following days, investigation teams confirmed the complete destruction of the Devourer hive. The Queen's death had severed the psychic links that controlled millions of drones across the planet. Without central coordination, the entire swarm had simply shut down. Scientists from across the galaxy would eventually study the remains, learning about an enemy that had nearly consumed countless civilizations. They would discover tunnel networks on dozens of other worlds, places where devourer hives had waited in dormancy for the right moment to awaken. But all of those hives were now silent, their queens destroyed by the resonance of Nuri's final song. Tai Min requested permission to bury Nuri in the ship's memorial garden, where crew members who died during the journey were laid to rest. Captain Dongsu agreed without hesitation. The creature had earned a place of honor among those who had sacrificed themselves for others. The funeral was attended by representatives of every species aboard the New Horizon. Even the aliens who had been terrified of the devourers seemed to understand that something important had happened. They stood in respectful silence as Taemin spoke about his friend. Nuri was the last of the Valdrak, he said, his voice carrying clearly in the quiet garden. A species created to stand guard against the darkness. It could have lived quietly, hiding from its destiny. Instead, it chose to honor the sacrifice of all its people who came before. He paused, looking around at the gathered crowd. Humans, Thraxians, Kelhari, and others, all united in their respect for the creature that had saved them. We called it Beastmaster, but I only spoke to one creature. And that creature taught me that real courage isn't about being fearless. It's about being afraid and choosing to act anyway. Nuri was afraid, but it chose to save us all. After the service, Taemin returned to his maintenance duties, but everything was different now. The other creatures in the biodeck still responded to his presence, but the deep connection he had shared with Nuri was gone. He was just a man again, no longer the mysterious Beastmaster who could calm any animal. The New Horizon continued its journey toward the colony world, carrying the survivors of Research Station Alpha and the knowledge of the Devourer threat. But it also carried something else, the memory of a creature that had given everything to protect life itself. In his quarters late at night, Tai Min would sometimes feel an echo of Nuri's presence, a warm feeling of companionship and understanding that reminded him he was never truly alone. The Valdrak had shared more than just its final moments with him. It had passed on the knowledge and love of an entire species. Somewhere in the depths of space, other worlds continued their peaceful existence, never knowing how close they had come to destruction. They owed their survival to a maintenance worker, who had learned to listen with his heart, and to the last of an ancient species that had chosen love over fear. The galaxy was safer now, but the price of that safety was a solitude that Tai Min would carry for the rest of his life. He had been chosen to witness the end of something magnificent, and to remember it for all those who would never know what the Valdrak had sacrificed. They had called him Beastmaster, but he had only truly spoken to one creature. And that creature had taught him that sometimes the greatest heroes are those who are forgotten by everyone, except the few who truly understand what they gave up to keep the light burning in the darkness.